This video is all about how to set up your stereo speakers. Some of you may just be getting into the better sound that separate speakers can provide and may not have given much thought to spending some time trying to get them in a location that might sound better. At the other end of the spectrum, I'm sure some of you watching have spent hours moving around your speakers trying to get them in the perfect spot. And some of you might have wanted to try and extract better sound, but just didn't know where to start. This guide is going to help you with that. Now, if you do a quick Google search for setting up speakers, you're gonna see a wide variety of guides out there. Some of them are very intensive with many hours of listening needed to really dial things in, and a lot of them assume that you have a room completely dedicated to your stereo system and that you can place things just wherever you want to. Now, if you do have that, fantastic. But most of us are limited in where we can place our speakers. So this guide here is gonna help you understand some ways to improve your sound even with limited space. Plus, if you have a rectangular room, it really isn't all that difficult to use a little bit of science to find a good starting point for some areas that will keep everyone in your household happy without having your speakers take over your entire room. Now, non-rectangular rooms or rooms that are open to other spaces are a bit more challenging and they do require a little bit more experimentation, but we will get into that. First, I want to go over what you will be trying to accomplish and how a little bit of science, like I said earlier, can actually help us a lot here. Any speaker playing in a room will have the primary sound wave coming from the speakers and the sound that reflects off the walls. The reflections are more problematic for bass frequencies and build up in some parts of your room, while other places in your room might actually cancel them out. Now, to see what I mean here, just put on a piece of music with a strong bass track and walk around the edges of your room, then go to a few spots in the middle of your room. You're gonna find that the bass is much more pronounced in some areas compared to others. By changing the position of your actual speakers, you are trying to get them in a spot where the way they interact with your room to decrease or increase lower frequencies is at a minimum at your listening position. The good news is, with a rectangular room, the best spots to put your speakers are a little bit somewhat predictable just using some simple math. Now, we do have to give Richard Vandersteen some credit here for some of the things that we're gonna be talking about in this video, as he came up with a scientific method that works really quite well here. Now, we see so many pictures of what could be awesome stereo systems with the speakers placed right against the back wall, even though there is room to move them around, and those just really make us cringe. Now, you may be one of those, as you might just not have known any better. If you are like a lot of people who simply have your speakers right up against that back wall, the easiest thing to try is just moving them out a little bit. But if you can dedicate a couple of hours to what we're gonna be talking about, we feel you will be rewarded with some really improved sound. Now, before we get any further, if you're thinking about diving into the super fun world of home stereo or upgrading to some better speakers, you can know that our passionate team of music lovers here at Audio Advice are always here to help you at audioadvice.com or any of our world-class showrooms. We could talk about your room and what type of speaker would be best for your space and your budget. And once you have your new system, you can always get best-in-class support to help you get the best sound no matter what. So, let's get started on making your sound system better with just a little bit of time and no extra money. First things first, you're gonna wanna gather up a tape measure, or even better, a laser one, some masking tape, and some of your favorite recordings. The music that you use needs to be full range with plenty of bass information that varies across the lower spectrum. We also like to have a recording with a single vocalist and one with 2 or more vocalists. The vocalist track do not need to have super full bass. So for these tracks, I suggest you pick recordings that sound really good to you and that you're really familiar with. Now, we wanna send full range, well-recorded sound to your speakers for all of these listening tests. Now, when you get things dialed in, hopefully, you're gonna be hearing the music that you're familiar with in an entire new light. I'll give you a few song suggestions here, and while you may not know these recordings, you should take a listen to these 3 to get an idea for the kind of sounds we hope you will be using for your testing. For the full range with lots of bass, check out the title track to the movie Wild Things by George Clinton. Starting at about 40 seconds in, you'll have a deep bass drum, bass guitar, and lots of percussive bass sounds that vary in a lot of frequency. When your speakers are positioned properly, these will all be very clear and distinct. For a single vocalist, check out Landslide from Fleetwood Mac. Stevie Nicks is right in the middle to help you get your speakers positioned correctly. And for multiple vocalists, listen to Cruisin' on the album Duets by Frank Sinatra. This features Huey Lewis and Gwyneth Paltrow. Or a cappella is good too, like you can hear with Under the Boardwalk by Persuasions on their album No Frills. Another great track to play once you are finished to really test things is Lay Me Down on the Crosby and Nash album. These are just suggestions to give you a sense of what to look for in your own test tracks. Okay, before you start, make darn sure your speaker connections are all properly done. In other words, confirm the speaker wire connected to the positive terminal on your amplifier is also connected to the positive terminal on your speaker. And then confirm that the left channel of your amplifier speaker connection actually goes to the left speaker. And if you have powered speakers, those will have some kind of identification for the right and the left, so just make sure you have them in the right spot. And for those of you that are new to this, when you're sitting in your listening chair facing your system, the one on your right side is the right channel and the one on your left side is the left channel. If you have tower speakers or stands with spikes, it will be easier if you remove the spikes for now. And if your speakers are heavy, it's a good idea to put some kind of slider underneath them so that you can easily move them around without having to pick them up each time. All right, so the basic premise is that your speakers will almost always sound better if they are away from room boundaries. And that back wall where you have them now is most definitely a room boundary. Now, we're gonna use some math to find the positions in your room that are least likely to introduce all of those bad reflections and start from there, rather than spending hours moving your speakers all over the room to find the best spots. And like I said before, math gives us a huge head start. Now, another thing I should point out here is that your listening position can have a pretty big influence here. If your chair or your couch is right against a wall and you have the freedom to move it out from the wall, even just a little bit, that can sometimes make a pretty big improvement in clarity. You don't even have to really move it out to hear it. You could just sit a foot or two forward and then take a listen and see what you hear. Okay, so it's time to get busy. If your room is a rectangle, measure its length and width. If it's not, use your best judgment to find what might be close to a rectangle, and hopefully you have at least two opposing walls that could make up a rectangle. Then find the distance from the wall behind your speakers to the opposing wall where your listening position is. Convert this to inches and divide it by odd numbers starting with 3. For example, if that number is 13 feet, that converts to 156 inches. 156 inches divided by 3 is 52 inches. By 5 is 31.2 inches, by 7 is 22.29 inches, by 9 is 17.33 inches, and by 11 is 14.18 inches. Round your numbers to the nearest whole and write them down. Now, draw a rectangle of your room. Take that wall your speakers are on and draw lines that are these distances off the rear wall your speakers are on. You don't really need to get it to scale, as you can just use the measurements, but if you did, it would look something like this. Now, take the other distance from the wall on your left and right and divide it by odd numbers, rounding them to the nearest whole, and write those down. Do the same thing, except now you will do the lines off each of the side walls, and when you are done, it should look something like this. Now, where these lines intersect are excellent starting points for your speakers to be positioned. Now, you will probably be able to rule out more than half of these, as most of us can't really put our speakers in the middle of the room, and you may also have furniture in the way anyways. Just circle the intersecting points that match the positions you are able to place your speakers, and it's about time to start listening. For this example, we have decided first to test the intersection that is 43 inches off the sidewalls and 22 inches off the back wall, as our room has some decent flexibility. Okay, so move your speakers until they are roughly centered over these points. This can be done pretty fast with a tape measure to measure from the side and rear wall. Play those 1 or 2 tracks that have some good bass information in them and see what you think. If you had your speakers against the back wall before, we're pretty sure that you're gonna hear a pretty big improvement in clarity now. So what you're listening for is bass and mid-range clarity. As bass notes change, they should be similar in volume level and should not sound like they're overpowering the other instruments in the track. You'll hear all this change a lot as you try out different positions. It's also important to keep both speakers the same distance off the back wall, but if you want to have them at different locations off the side walls, that can be okay, especially if that might center them better on your listening position. At this point, we also also want to keep the speakers parallel to the rear wall with no angle in. And after trying about 3 intersections, you'll start to get a feel for how the sound is changing, and you'll likely prefer one position over another. Once you find that position, try changing the center point by 1 or 2 inches, either or both ways, to hear if the sound gets any better. When you get close, make sure to use a tape measure to confirm each speaker is the exact same distance as the other off the back wall. When you're satisfied, measure the distance that they are off both the side wall and rear wall, or put some masking tape around each speaker to mark its best spot. Be sure to write those numbers down in case you get interrupted and need to come back later. Now it's time to start playing around with what audiophiles call toe-in. This is basically just angling in your speakers to try and make the musicians sound more like they are right in front of you. Start with a single vocalist and try angling your speakers in a little bit at a time until the vocals sound dead centered and pretty small in perceived size. If your room has a lot of reflective surfaces that you haven't addressed, you may not be able to even hear this, as those reflections can make this part pretty hard. We have a whole guide on room acoustics linked below if you want more help on your room acoustics before moving forward. Now, the toe-in is a little bit subjective here. You'll find as you increase the angle, the sound may not be as wide. This part of the setup is going to be a little bit personal, so after you've tried a single vocalist track, try one with 2 or with lots of harmony. Eventually, you're going to find the position that works best for your speakers, room, and your personal tastes. Now, you'll need to measure the corner of each speaker from the rear wall and then either the front or back side from the side wall. During the toe-in test, one speaker may have moved not to be the exact same distance off the rear walls as the other, so be sure you get that right before taking your final measurements. These numbers are going to be pretty valuable after you've spent all this time, so again, make sure you write them down and put them in a safe spot. Now, if your speaker had spikes on them, you're going to want to put those spikes back on, but this part can be a little bit tricky. We suggest that you first remove any tape you've used in the first steps and put new tape around at least 2 of the sides of the speakers. Then go ahead and install your spikes and carefully make sure they're in the exact same position that you just had them. This can be a little bit tedious and maybe require some rocking to get the spikes in perfect position, but trust me, it's really worth it. You will also want to make sure the speaker is perfectly level and the spikes are locked down so that there's no rocking of the speaker. And if you have spade lugs or bare wire connections at your speakers, check to make sure that they're still tight around your speaker cables after all that moving around. Okay, go ahead and pat yourself on the back here, and it's time to start enjoying your music, hopefully at what is a brand new level. We find that for so many people who take a little bit of time to go through this entire process and listen more, it's like getting an entirely new stereo system. If you have more questions about this, feel free to reach out to our expert team at audioadvice.com or stop by any of our award-winning showrooms. We'd be more than happy to help you out. Now, we also have videos on how to set up a 2-channel system if you're just getting started, or the most common mistakes that people make, and even a video that's all about our favorite demo tracks when we're testing 2-channel systems. I'll link all of those below. We also have a massive library of more free content on this channel and at audioadvice.com if you're looking for more. So if you'd like to support us, please give this video a thumbs up if it's helped you. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you don't miss out on any of our latest videos. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.